Welcome back to the Following Your Gut podcast, live at the NANP conference, HealCon, out here in Bellevue, Washington. And I'm very excited to sit down with Dr. Shawn Talbott. Dr. Shawn. I got excited there. I fumbled it. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, it's great to join you.
Yeah. And you are one of the speakers at the conference, correct?
Right. Yeah. So this year I'm talking about peptides, a very hot, interesting, controversial area right now.
It seems to be kind of I don't want to say a flavor of the year, but peptides are here right now, whereas other things are not quite as hotly talked about.
That's a great way to think about it. Yeah, it's a little bit like kind of like fashion, right?
Yeah.
It's like this is the hot, new shiny thing that everybody's talking about. Will it last? I think it's got staying power because there's some changing regulations, and RFK Jr. is behind them, and so we'll see where it all goes.
I'm with you. I think peptides are going to stay. Maybe they won't be quite as interesting in 5 years, but they're always going to have relevance.
Right, exactly.
Okay, but you're not necessarily only about peptides. You have a very wide cast net of expertise.
Yeah.
And you do everything from psychology to physiology, and your focus is something about the second brain, which is music to my ears because we are a digestive health specialist.
Yes, exactly.
But when you hear second brain, how do you frame that?
Yeah, so I frame it from a biochemical perspective, right? So my PhD is in nutritional biochemistry. The kind of work that I've done for the last almost 30 years now is sometimes called nutritional psychology, which didn't exist when I was in grad school, right? It's a whole new field. This idea of your food and your nutrients and your enzymes changing what happens in the gut and that changing your psychology. So a lot of what I talk about is the fact that, how you feel is not just in your head, it's also in your gut. And the gut is a second brain that's producing 90% of our serotonin for happiness, 70% of our dopamine for motivation, probably 50% of our GABA, the neurotransmitter that relaxes us when we're stressed out, and a whole range of other things. Your gut produces peptides, your gut produces short-chain fatty acids, all these signaling molecules that come from your gut will permeate out into the rest of your body and will have effects on your mood, your stress levels, your sleep quality, maybe even your longevity. So it's a really fascinating area that, a lot of what I talk about, it comes back to the gut, and we have to make sure the gut is functioning properly.
I mean, it's everything that we echo in a variety of different ways in terms of what we talk about. And functionally, I think most people nowadays experience gut issues.
Right.
And I would say there's probably a mirror and some dysregulation, behavioral patterns, emotional dysregulations, even just general satisfaction with the life that they live. How do you start educating people on figuring out what might be going wrong with their second brain?
Yeah, well, you just said it really, really succinctly. When I talk about the gut as a second brain and the fact that it signals your first brain, people sometimes go, well, this probably isn't for me because I don't really have gut problems. People think like, oh, I have to have heartburn or constipation or diarrhea or irritable bowel syndrome or something like that, right? It's not these big life-changing, life-interrupting kinds of ailments that you need to have. It could be the fact that if your digestion is not right or your motility is not right, your energy isn't quite as good as you want it to be, or your mood isn't quite there, or you're a little bit brain foggy. Those are all things that I think a lot of people don't realize that those problems are emanating from their gut. And they just think, oh, well, I'm not getting enough sleep, or I'm not eating a perfect diet. I get too many processed foods and not enough salads, or I have a lot of stress in my life, right? And that's very logical. Those things can affect. But if you can get your gut balanced, it can change everything. Or let me say it another way, actually. You can be doing all the right things, right? You can be, eating the salads and not the processed foods, and you can be getting your 8 hours of sleep, and you can be doing all the things that you're supposed to be doing, moving your body every day, but you're not getting the effects that you think you should be getting. You're not getting the benefits. You're like, why am I spinning my wheels? Why am I stuck? It is because your gut is out of balance. You might have leaky gut. You might have poor digestion. You might have poor absorption. So we go and we focus on the gut, and then people come back. One of the funnest comments that I get back from people is that once we solve their gut issues and we get their gut-brain axis signaling appropriately, they'll come back and they'll go, oh my gosh, I lost weight, or my energy is back, or my brain fog is gone. And I didn't even know I had brain fog until it went away. and they think that it was just the gut change. But what I like people to understand is that once you make that gut change, it gives traction to all the other things that you're doing,
Hmm.
So it really is this like multifactorial kind of a system approach.
Yeah, because one thing will affect all things in
Right,
physiology. What's happening in the gut is not isolated to being problematic only there.
right,
It's
exactly.
connected to everything via all of these other axes. Talking about the gut-brain axes, I'd be very interested to know, this is in your opinion, or at least from your observation, how does this gut-brain axis, this regulation begin in most people? What do you see clinically, but also from a research perspective?
Yeah, I think the main place where it starts for most people is lack of fiber.
Interesting, lack of fiber.
Yeah, so
Okay.
that's probably our biggest nutrient deficiency that most people in the Western world have. If you look at the recommendations, US, Canada, Europe, it's around 30, 40 grams
Mhm.
per day of fiber recommended, right? So let's say 30 because it'll make the math easy. In the United States, most people are getting around 15, so half of the recommendation, and a lot of people are getting a lot less than that. And the reason for it is that, we're not eating fruits and vegetables, we're not eating whole grains, we're eating lots of processed food, which is devoid of fiber. And if we're not eating enough fiber, it's starving our microbiome. The bacteria in our gut want fiber as their primary fuel source. And if we're not getting fiber, they can't do their job. So they can't make short chain fatty acids. So then we have problems with our metabolism and we have problems with our immune system. They can't make all the neurotransmitters that we need, right? So we're not getting enough fiber. We're starving our microbiome. Our microbiome can't make those signals. And so now we feel stressed out, we feel fatigued, we feel brain fog, we feel poor sleep quality, and that's just sort of cascades. So is the solution just magically eat more fiber? Uh, yes and no. There's phytonutrients that we're not getting. There's fermented foods that do a whole nother set of things for the microbiome, but it's the fact that we're eating too many processed foods.
Now, in regards to fiber, is it simply about quantity or is it about diversity and types of
It
fiber?
really is diversity in
Can
types of
you
fiber.
go into that a little bit more?
Yeah, so one of the funnest things that I do with my students is we do what's called the 30 plant challenge, which I'm sure you've heard of
I
before.
heard, yeah.
So 30 plant challenge is based on this idea that you'll eat 30 different plant foods in a 7-day period.
Mhm.
And people always wonder, like, where did that number come from? Why 30? Why not 35? Why not 25? Um, a big research project called the American Gut Project analyzed the microbiomes of thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of people, including mine. Did you ever submit a sample to
I
the
did
American
not.
Gut?
No, I was rejected because I was Canadian.
Yeah,
I'm joking.
there you go. So, looking across all these hundreds of thousands of people, they're looking at microbiome diversity, which is generally like the thing that we want people to do, right? More diversity is going to be a better thing.
And
Because
diversity is defined as a greater swath of species within a
yes,
sample.
exactly, exactly. So
Yeah.
think of your microbiome being a rainforest
Yep.
instead of a monoculture.
Yes.
That's if you have a diversity, you're going to be producing lots and lots of different signaling molecules,
Yes.
and that's going to be associated with good mood and resilience
Mhm.
and mental fitness and things like that. So how do we get that good microbiome diversity? We eat a diversity of plant foods, which gives us a diversity of different fibers. So when people hear me say eat more fiber, and you need 30 grams, or we probably actually need more like 50 or 60 or 100, right? So you're going to want to slowly move
You're
up to
not
that, which we
suggesting crushing Metamucil
no,
either.
exactly. Well, that's what people make the mistake. They go, oh, I'll just do some psyllium fiber, or I'll just do some oat bran, or I'll just do some.
You get severely constipated.
Yeah, you'll get severely constipated, and you will not get the diversity that you're looking for because each of those gut microbes likes a different kind of fiber. And so if you can get a diversity of fiber in your diet by eating 30 different plants, you'll get a diversity of microbes and
Mhm.
you'll produce a diversity of these signaling molecules. If you only eat one kind of fiber, you're going to grow preferentially the one kind or the few kinds of microbes that like that fiber. It's kind of like if you were a zookeeper, right? And you have to take care of all these different animals. The zebras eat a different kind of diet than the elephants, and they eat a different diet than the lions, and they eat a
Yeah.
different diet than the chimpanzees, and et cetera, et cetera. Well, microbiome's the same way. So we want to give some leafy greens, and we want to give some whole grains, and we want to give some, et cetera, et cetera. Those are all different fiber sources that feed different microbes, and you get different signaling molecules.
Speaking
So,
of signaling molecules, you mentioned short chain fatty acids.
yeah.
People know about these things. The SCFA, it's
Yep.
things that get thrown around a lot. would you be able to go into a little deeper detail in terms of explaining them and how they play a role as a signaling molecule? Because I think this is misunderstood to the degree that it's actually detrimental not to understand this for gut
Right,
health.
right. So short chain fatty acids. So if we have a deficiency of fiber, we have a deficiency of that fermentable substrate, right? The
Yeah.
bacteria. So we don't digest fiber, right? Fiber is not good for us.
We don't have beta, we can't cleave the beta bonds in
Right,
fibers.
exactly. But the fiber is good for the microbiome. So, and if the microbiome is happy, then we're happy as the host organism. The side stream, the waste product, if you will, of the bacteria working on that fiber is these short chain fatty acids. And so, I also joke with my students, they'll say, well, what do short chain fatty acids do? And I'll say, well, what do you want them to do? Because
Interesting.
they do everything. They help your blood sugar control through making your insulin more sensitive. They are good for your immune system. They help improve your gut integrity, so they reduce leaky gut. They have so many effects. And so if you're deficient in them because you're not eating enough fiber, you're deficient in all those beneficial effects. So now your immune system might be overactive or underactive. So there's a role of short chain fatty acids in preventing autoimmune system diseases, and making sure your immune system is resilient enough to fight off the next virus that comes down the pike. Um, they're yeah, so they do lots of different things. So there's this an idea in the nutraceutical world that, okay, if short chain fatty acids are so great, why don't I just supplement with them?
Like a supplemental butyrate capsule.
Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
and you can do that. And you might take the approach of taking some short chain fatty acids and eating more fiber, diverse
Mm,
fiber, so you can make more short chain fatty acids, right? So doing it from both perspectives.
interesting. I like that philosophy because if you look at the concept of a supplement, it's in the name.
Yeah, right.
People associate the supplement as the fix, but ideally what you do is you use the supplement to help shore up the weak area in the
Yes,
physiology
100%.
and also use the well-roundedness of behavioral habitual
Yep.
changes to make your lifestyle more conducive to
Yep.
fixing the thing. It's really going to have the staying power.
Yep, exactly. And I'm a huge fan of supplements, right? When you have good
Yes.
research
As are
behind
me.
good quality supplements, they can be used like I kind of describe it as like at the front end of your regimen or the back end of your regimen, right? So the back end would be, you're having a good diet, you're moving your body, you're getting your sleep, you're hydrating, you're doing all the things. And then the supplement is like the last piece of the puzzle to sort of
Mhm.
bring it all together. It can also, in some cases, be the first piece of the puzzle where you have somebody who is really stressed out or they're not sleeping well or they're not eating a good diet, right? Because they're getting stress eating and they're drawn to fast food and things like that. Sometimes you can use a supplement at the front end of that to help them feel better. You can lower their stress, and if you lower their stress, maybe they're more inclined to eat better. Or you can increase their energy and they're more inclined to move their body. Or you can relax them at night and they're more inclined to get a good night's sleep, right? And so if you do that the right way and do it strategically, right? So you're not saying take this supplement and it's going to solve all these problems. You're saying take this supplement and it's going to make you more likely to make the lifestyle choices that we all need we're supposed to make, right? And
Mhm.
and this is like gives you more bandwidth, so to speak, to make that choice. Then you use it in that fashion. So now people are making better choices.
I like that concept of strategic use because I've worked with people in the past, and I'm sure you've had the scenario too. They come in with like 13 bottles of something,
Yes,
they're different
exactly.
things. And my question is always, I don't say this out loud, but in my thoughts, how do you know which thing is doing what in this context of
Right,
isolation? But if you have these things that you're just gathering together,
right,
what's the outcome of one plus one plus all these
right,
things?
right,
Maybe it might not be what you think it does.
right,
So
exactly.
having some modicum of strategery.
Yeah,
Yes,
exactly. Yep,
and understanding, okay, I've added this variable. I'm going to look at the outcome.
yep,
Did it get better? Did it get worse?
yep.
Try a new
Do I need to
variable.
tweak here? Do I need to tweak
Love
there?
that.
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly.
And that's not too dissimilar from the approach to fiber, right?
Yep,
It's like vary the different foods. There's fermentable and non-fermentable fibers in different foods. Getting a variance in the diet is
yep.
probably going to help the body in its development of what you're wanting
Yep,
as an
yep,
outcome.
yep. And one of the places where I think like enzymes fit right in there, right? Because then what we're trying to do with people is say like, hey, we need you to eat more fiber. We need you to eat these 30 different plants, right? And probably you're eating three plants right now. We need you to eat more protein. We need you to eat all these foods that you're not used to. Sometimes you'll get people who will get very enthusiastic about it and they'll make those dietary choices and they'll come back and they go, I actually felt worse. I got constipated. I got diarrhea. I got some bloating. I got because they don't have the machinery there to digest all these wonderful nutrients and absorb all these wonderful nutrients that we're recommending. That's where sometimes enzymes can sort of help them ease into the program, so to speak, right? So they can get more bang for their buck.
Oh, that's a very nice segue because I wanted to ask you, we did the fiber, the short chain fatty acids, and the signaling. I would imagine digestion plays a huge role in the
Huge.
secondary dysregulation. What is that mechanism that you see dysfunctional digestion creating inside of the gut that then creates the axis dysregulation?
Yeah, exactly. Where to start? If you're not digesting appropriately, if you're not absorbing appropriately, if you're not moving the food through the digestive tract with the right speed, right, your motility,
Yeah.
you're not gonna get the nutrients that you need, right? And that's going to change the transit time and of the food going through is going to change the bacterial profile. It's going to change the inflammatory context. I talk about the environment of the gut.
Yeah.
Enzymes can be really good for helping to set the environment of the gut. So think of the gut now in this sense of it's a greenhouse, right? Where you're trying to grow these plants, the microbes, and you need to have the right environment. You need to have the right level of acid. You need to have the right level of base. You need to have the right atmosphere, so to speak, so that you grow the good bacteria and you maybe not necessarily kill off the bad bacteria, but at least you make it less hospitable for E. coli and salmonella and things like that.
It's like a terrain theory.
It's a terrain theory,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting because a lot of people have this perspective in, I don't like using the word alternative medicine,
Yeah.
but it's functional, naturalistic practices that if there's things there, you just got to kill them.
Right.
Got to drop carpet bombs
Right.
on the critters and get rid of them. You're advocating that might not be the best approach.
Yeah.
I'm interested in knowing your philosophy behind that. I'm not
Yeah.
agreeing or disagreeing with you. I'm genuinely interested in the
Yeah.
science.
So when we say good bacteria and bad bacteria, that's an oversimplification,
Yeah,
right?
contextual statement.
Yeah. So it's not that the reason we call the good guys is because they're producing the signaling molecules we want, right? They're
Mhm.
producing serotonin, so we're happier, and short chain fatty acids that we
Yeah.
talked about, right? So we want more of those, right? The bad guys, the reason we call them bad guys is because they tend to produce inflammatory markers, right? They're producing a cytokine that we don't want that's going to either block one of our neurotransmitters or it's going to cause an inflammatory issue on its own. Um, but sometimes we want some of those quote unquote bad guys because they will take a place that will displace a really bad guy. So you might have a bacteria that isn't great. It's not doing anything good for you, but it's not really doing anything really detrimental,
It's like
right? It's
defined
not,
as a neutral
it's
commensal bacteria.
exactly right.
Yeah.
So it can in the context of that entire diversity, it's not doing you anything bad, but it's blocking a really bad guy that could come in and completely decimate everything.
Just came into my head as an analogy. Like a neighborhood, a person who doesn't participate in the garage sales, like they don't
Yeah.
participate in the community, but they're to themselves. They keep
Yes,
their house clean. They're that person.
yes,
It's
yes,
like,
exactly.
it's just Joe down the
Exactly.
road. He waves,
But
but he doesn't do
Joe's not
anything.
going to mug you,
But
you
he's not
know?
running a meth lab in his basement.
Exactly. 100%. That's a
Yeah.
great way to think of it.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that's what the placeholder of those commensals are essentially doing.
Right, right,
They're stopping the potential, the real pathogen from coming in and wreaking havoc within the gut.
right, right.
Okay,
Exactly.
interesting.
Exactly. And when you have the right environment in the gut, your gut is more likely to have that diversity. Microbiome is a very confusing area of science right now. The one thing that anybody who studies the microbiome agrees on is the fact that more diversity is generally a good thing,
Yeah.
right? So like that always is sort of my guiding light when I'm making recommendations either to my students or my clients to say, you know what, 30 plant challenge, get a diversity, make sure you have the right environment, make sure you're doing your fiber and your fermented foods and your flavonoids. And when you just take like a few little principles like that, you can really make a lot of wonderful benefits in the right direction.
And to the point that you made about eradicating bacteria potentially being detrimental, the thing that I always think about is, okay, so you want to kill some bacteria with herbs, antibiotics, whatever.
Yeah.
How do you know which guys are getting wiped out?
You don't
Because
always,
you
right?
don't.
Yeah.
What if you're wiping out some of the keystones that really
Yep.
anchor the community in there?
Yep.
I would assume, based upon a little bit of studying the speed of replication of certain strains, the ones that are more fragile and susceptible, which might be the ones you want to keep, theoretically, if you go on a killing rampage,
Yep.
you might do more detriment than benefit in the
Yes.
long run
Yes.
because pathogens seem to be a little bit more adaptable.
Yeah.
That's why they're
Yeah.
pathogens.
Yeah,
They're
exactly. Yeah,
opportunists.
they're a little more resilient in certain
Yeah.
ways,
Yeah.
right? And the fact that we like the world that we live in right now, where there's so much processed food, if you go through, an antibiotic, regimen, you kill off, let's say that it's just even, right? It
Mm.
kills off the good guys and the bad guys at the same time, right? So you've just killed off, 50% of your diversity. The world that we live in and the processed food that we're exposed to, you will preferentially grow the kinds of bacteria back that we don't want,
Mhm.
right? Unless you're very uh, persistent and precise about saying, oh, I just went through this antibiotic regimen. Now I really need to make sure that I'm getting my 30 plants and I'm getting my fermented foods and I'm putting my enzymes back and I'm, getting all the phytonutrients that I need, right? If you're not dialed in on that, you're gonna have a problem with your diversity, problem with your signals, problem with your mental well-being.
I think a lot of people, after a course of antibiotics, can create insidious problems like candida and yeast
Yeah.
overgrowth or
Yep.
parasitic inoculation
Yep.
because the terrain isn't all that resilient
That's
in that
right.
moment. And then, like, oh, I want something sugary. Oh, I want something.
Yep.
And
Yep.
it's,
And that creates this vicious cycle of you
yeah,
want something sugary, and then you grow a population of bacteria that thrives on sugar. And then when they get hungry, they'll send a signal to the brain that you interpret as something sugary would be great right now,
yeah.
and it perpetuates itself.
Task who's really in control.
Totally. Yes. 100%.
That's wild. So, do you have a antibiotic protocol as a guideline that you suggest to your patients or your students or any
No, not
some strategies?
Yeah, so an antibiotic protocol is to use a lot of spices.
Okay.
So spices count in your 30 plant challenge.
Mhm.
So if you're liberally using spices, oregano and basil and garlic and all the things that are probably already in your spice cabinet, those have how can I say this, like light antibiotic effects, but probably not in the way that most people think, right? You'd have to take a pretty big dose of these spices to have a killing effect, but they help set up the environment of the gut. So that environment is, the right acid base levels and the right integrity and things like that. This is also where enzymes can come in, where we're using combinations of enzymes and motility enhancers and things like that to make sure that the food is moving through the right way. And as a result of that, you're preferentially growing the good guys and dissuading the growth of the bad guys.
Yeah, you want to make the environment inhospitable for the bad guys. I mean,
Right.
it's a simple concept, and what I agree with what you said is we know a lot about microbiome science, but we don't know as much as I think people make it out to be from a microscopic activity level. We
Right.
don't have the sensitivity of diagnostics to
Right.
go in and say this plus that equals this
Right,
outcome, and
right,
therefore it's the
exact,
same for
exact.
everyone.
And part of the reason is you think about the trillions of bacteria that are there. They're not just doing one thing. You might have a bacteria that is making something that it doesn't we don't use, but one of the other bacteria uses to fuel their metabolism, and then they'll make something we do use. So all the different permutations of how they're communicating with each other and facilitating the growth or interfering with the growth of their community members,
Yeah.
right? That like we are years away, even using AI, we are years away from understanding all those communication permutations.
Yeah, I always think about it being like its own little
It
universe,
is very much
and
so.
we don't understand how our universe works, let alone one shrunken
Yep,
down to a
yep,
small model.
yep,
It's
yep,
fascinating
yep,
stuff.
exactly. And then even just inside the body, I specialize in the gut brain axis, but there's a gut lung axis and a gut liver axis and a gut skin axis, and it's all these signals that are going to and fro, and it's fascinating as a scientist. It's a great place to be in learning.
Yeah.
You're learning something new every day, it seems like, but it also can be very confusing from a consumer perspective of like, okay, what do I even do? You know,
When people are overwhelmed, they end up doing nothing and
Nothing.
they just
Yes.
do what they've always done
Yep.
because habit is easier to maintain. I want to shift gears on you here, and I want to ask something that I'm genuinely interested in. And I hope if it's beyond the scope of what's able to be answered, please be forthright. But when it comes to the gut-brain axis and connecting into the behavioral science,
Hmm.
Do you observe any patterns that exist where it connects from functional disturbance to behavioral outcome? An example might be if someone suffers from anxiety, I see these patterns in them. If someone
Yeah,
suffers from dopamine deficiency
yeah.
syndrome, I see these. What are things that you found?
Yeah, so as a biochemist, right?
Yeah.
One of the things that I say to my students all the time is that biochemistry drives behavior. So if somebody is presenting with some sort of a psychological disturbance, right? They're depressed, they have anxiety, um, PTSD, garden variety brain fog, like any of those things that they're experiencing, there's a biochemical reason for it. And so that's why, like in my seminars, I'm always saying, like, okay, what's underlying that, what's underlying that, what's underlying that. So an example is like, you could be depressed, right? You have someone with depression, and the knee-jerk reaction would be, oh, serotonin problem, right? Serotonin problem, let's give them Prozac or one of those style drugs. It'll increase their serotonin, and they'll feel less sad. That only works for 20-30% of people.
Mhm.
Why is that? Is it because serotonin is not involved? No, it's because serotonin is only one piece of this overall communication network that goes all the way from your brain all the way down to the gut. So it could be a serotonin problem. And if you solve that problem with a Prozac style drug, hooray, right? There's people who benefit from that. But it could be that that serotonin is fine, but it's being blocked by cortisol signal or an inflammatory signal. So your serotonin's fine. Increasing your serotonin is not going to solve your problem. Your problem is to lower your cortisol or lower your inflammatory molecules. And then the serotonin hits its target and you feel happier. Well, what's driving that cortisol or what's driving that inflammation? It could be your immune system is out of balance. You could have some autoimmune system thing going on. Your immune system is agitated. It's increasing your inflammation, and that's the problem. So, okay, let's get your inflammation down. We could, give someone fish oil or curcumin or, any variety of anti-inflammatory things. Well, where's that inflammation coming from? Maybe it's coming from your immune system. So maybe we can do immune system balancers. We can do beta glucans or something. Well, what's causing your immune system to be agitated? It could be that you have leaky gut. So maybe we need to, solve something there with your tight junctions. Well, what's causing your gut to be leaky? It could be the environment of the gut, which we were talking
Yeah,
about.
yeah.
It could be you have too many of the bad guys, not enough of the good guys. It could be you have too much inflammation in your gut. And so it's this idea of root cause, root cause, root cause, root cause. And the thing one of the reasons I talk about the microbiome so much, that's about as root as we can get right now. And 5 or 10 years ago, we weren't talking about the microbiome. 5 or 10 years from now, we might be talking about something else that's, underlying the microbiome that we don't know about yet.
There's this term called the psychobiome that's been emerging over
Yes.
the last little bit, and I think these new frontiers of science are exciting, but we're at the point of like, oh, it's a thing. Where do we start with it?
Yeah.
But I agree with you. In 5 or 10 years, it could be that you're being able to influence the behavioral aspect of a person through shifting the microbiome patternistically.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And we are getting to the point now where we can point to specific strains of bacteria. We can say this one we know makes a lot of GABA. So this could be an anti-stress bacteria. This one makes a lot of serotonin. This one could be an anti-depression bacteria. And start to, combine those. And, they might look good in a petri dish. They might look good in an animal model.
Yeah.
They may or may not work in a human model, so we're still early days in all of
I
this.
love that you said that because that's one of the hallmarks of what we do with our probiotics. We have a strain designation on every microbe that
Yes.
we put in our bottles. And even at this conference, people are asking, so what makes you guys different? I always go there first. This is
Yeah.
something else to talk about, our deep delivery technology. But at the very least, in isolation, we know what the microbe's characteristics are.
Yep.
And I always use strain designation as an example of giving someone a true identity because I know you as Shawn, but you've told me you're also a scientist, a researcher, a clinician. So the strain designation gives that microbe a true identity.
Right.
Whereas if you're taking something that only goes to the genius level,
Yep.
how many lactobacillus acidophilus are there?
Right. Right. Exactly. Exactly. That's a soapbox I get up on a lot. That
Yeah.
if you don't know the strain identity, right, strain specificity, you really don't know what that bacteria is supposed to do.
Hmm.
So an example that I'll use is Lactobacillus rhamnosus, right? There are some Lactobacillus rhamnosus strains that are good for constipation, There are others that are good for diarrhea. There's others that are good for anti-stress. There's others that are good for recurrent vaginal yeast infections, right? And if you just said, I'm going to get a lactobacillus rhamnosus, and you don't know which of those strains you're getting, you might be getting an opposite effect. You
Mhm.
might be getting some sort of an effect that is completely different than what you're looking for, or you might not be getting any effect at all. You know?
Watching money burn
Yeah.
up in the air
Yep.
and then being discouraged by
Yeah.
the
And then
outcome.
say, oh, probiotics don't work.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Tell everyone.
Yeah.
It doesn't do
Yeah.
anything.
Exactly.
I love that we went down that rabbit hole. I love the happy accidents of just falling into places. Okay, I want to end with some aspects of practicality if we can. So people who listen to this, they're hearing everything, they're going, I love what this guy's talking about. Where do I start? How do I know if I'm dealing with something behaviorally?
Yeah.
How do I get something assessed? What can I do to determine a baseline? What can I do next? How would you guide people into terms of taking their own action here?
Yeah, so the easiest thing for people to do is going to be to eat fewer processed foods, right? Easier said than done
Yep.
in the world we live in. Do what I call the three Fs, which is eat more fiber, flavonoids, fermented foods. And that can be really easy. It can be really fun for people to just sort of like, it's easier for people to add things into their diet than to take things away. So I would rather somebody add a handful of blueberries than to take away something that that they're currently taking, right? So, try to do those three Fs. And then from there, if you're going to go into the supplement realm, I'm a big advocate of, make sure that when you're looking at a supplement, you're asking the companies that produce it, what strains are you using and why? How are you extracting this particular herb and why? Because the companies that are doing it the right way and doing strain specificity or using research validated herbal extracts, they will go out of their way to tell you why.
Mhm.
This is, and you can do it, you can do it from two perspectives. You can say, here's this thing, what does it do? And where's the research? What's the proof? Or I'm trying to look at this benefit. What do you have that delivers that benefit? So if you're looking for probiotic strain that helps with mood, there are several psychobiotics that will do that, and the companies that are purveying those will tell you.
Excellent. And what about when someone wants to do
And
deeper?
and
Oh,
and the companies that don't
yeah.
will try to dance around it,
Yes.
right?
That
So
is a
like,
very good point. We are very proud of what it is we do, and we like to
yeah,
talk about it. And the opposite is also true. It's
yes,
like, oh, you just poked on a wound.
yeah,
We're gonna deflect.
there's no such thing as a generic probiotic. So if you're seeing Lactobacillus acidophilus and you're not seeing the strain designation, which is usually a combination of letters and numbers, depending on the company, if you're not seeing that, you should go choose something else,
Mhm.
right? If you're seeing an herbal extract that is not standardized to a particular bioactive ingredient, you should go look for a different one because
Mhm.
there are better options out there.
And what about addressing behavioral change? Because you have a coaching course
Mhm.
too, as well, mental coaching course. Do you suggest that someone starts on purely the physiologic biochemical side, or should they do concurrent strategies with maybe coaching themselves through models of thinking,
Yeah,
behavioral
yeah,
change?
yeah. So in our coaching course, we have 11 modules. So there's a module on the gut. There's a module on the microbiome. There's a module on uh, 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 inflammatory balance and immune system, and et cetera, et cetera. But then there's also a set of modules that are around mindset
Mhm.
and moving your body and exposing yourself to nature and grounding and being around people that have the same energetic
Yeah,
vibe and
yeah.
things like that, right? So and some of it's very hardcore science, some of it is very hardcore psychology, um, and some of it gets a little woo woo because some of it's we don't have the science for it right now, right? And one of the funny stories I tell is like I'm old enough to remember when I was in graduate school, we used to poo poo the idea when like our hippies, right, natural products people out there in the world would say, oh, all disease begins in the gut. Right. And we go, oh, isn't that cute? Right. Hippocrates said
Yeah.
2000 years
Think
ago, oh,
you're original.
yeah, yeah. And we're like, that's ridiculous. There's no research to show that. All the gut does is your digestion and absorbs your nutrients. That's what it's there for. And now, fast forward 30 years, and we go, oh, well, disease does begin in the gut. And because now we have the science to say it's this bacteria and it's your leaky gut and it's inflammatory cascade and it's these signaling molecules. And science has finally caught up to what people had, intuitively felt and observed, So that's what I love about this industry is that you get to bring both of those worlds together and they all have benefits.
and it's ever evolving
Yes.
rapidly. I
Yeah.
mean, two things. One, to talk about woo woo. We have a little frequency generator device right now, so I'm on that train. Because to me, you talked about how biochemistry drives behavior and the hierarchy of science, which I'm super excited about the future. So physiology is dictated by biology. Biology is dependent upon chemistry. Chemistry is pulled to do with physics.
Yep.
So
Yep.
as we get deeper in this world, it's going to be super exciting knowing how to pair right frequencies plus
Yep.
supplements plus the behavioral strategy changes plus the
Yep,
lifestyle
yep,
stuff.
yep, exactly.
Um,
So at this conference last year, I gave a talk about the microbiome and the gut-brain axis, and there was a woman in front, and I could hear she said it kind of under her breath, right? I was talking about all these signals and kind of the hierarchy you just went through, and she went, "It's all energy," and I heard her because she was right there, and I went, "It is. It's all
yeah.
energy." And it's like, sometimes that energy is a biochemical it's a cortisol molecule,
Yeah.
or we can name them now, but it's all energy.
I remember reading a book by a gentleman named Dr. Fred Bell, and I'll never forget in the first part of this chapter, it said, hormones are the first molecules with consciousness in the body.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because you
Yeah.
think about how powerful things like hormones and neurotransmitters are to drive our behavior. So
Right.
there's something to these
Yes.
statements. It's just, I think science is catching up to what people have intuitively known.
Right.
So we could say woo woo might be also just common sense that we don't have the mechanisms of
Yes.
action for yet.
Exactly. Yep.
I love
Well
that.
said.
Dr. Shawn, where can people find more about you, what you're doing? If they are practitioners, you have a course, but
Yep.
people who just want to learn more about their health, can they also take these courses?
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. So our course is it's not just for health professionals. So it's called the Certified Mental Wellness Coach
Mhm.
course. It's if you need continuing education units, it's approved by lots of organizations, including NANP,
Okay.
for 16 CEUs. But lots of people just take it for themselves. They take it to learn more about their bodies and how they can perform better and feel better, and they use the principles with their families and things like that. So that course is at my website, doctalbot.com.
Very
And so
cool.
people can find out all the information right there. And, we've got a lot of free stuff. If you don't want to do the full 16-hour course, you can, do a 3-hour course about cortisol or the gut brain axis or something like that.
I so hope people start taking this personal responsibility of investing and knowing about how the thing that they go through their life with works,
Yeah.
because that's going to create the shift.
Yeah.
No one's coming to save you. You can't rely upon,
No one's coming to save you. One
yeah,
body, one life. You got to
yeah.
take some responsibility, right?
You want to live your best life. You gotta invest.
100%.
I love that. So I love your systems thinking approach. There's so much alignment with what you said in terms of the things that I and we as a company talk about. So I really want to thank you for taking the time here.
Awesome.
I know you're busy,
Thanks
but
for
thank
the
you for
great
making it for
conversation.
us. All
Appreciate
right.
it.
And thank you, everyone. We'll see you next time. Thanks again. Take care.